I hope the High Holy Days were meaningful for all of you. It's been wonderful to share in these very impactful days together, and our marathon of High Holidays continues. Tonight we begin our celebration of Sukkot, which is on the 15th of Tishrei, the 7th month of the Jewish calendar. Sukkot is one of our three pilgrimage holidays, as Rabbi Klein mentioned earlier, along with Passover and Shavuot. Our Feast of Booths, which comes from Leviticus 23:34, we recall the days when the Israelites lived in huts or Sukkot during their years of wandering through the wilderness after their exodus from Egypt. And according to Deuteronomy 16:14, we are commanded to rejoice on your festival. And our sages explain that the only true joy is shared joy. And the full verse reads, "You shall rejoice in your festival, you, your children, your servants, the Levite, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow who are within your cities." Judaism puts community and gathering at the center, at the core of our practice. It isn't enough for us to just recall the holiday, but to really intentionally gather. In the Mishneh, which was composed by the 12th century Spanish philosopher Maimonides, he articulates that when one eats and drinks on Sukkot, one must also feed the stranger, the orphan, the widow, and other unfortunate paupers. But one who locks the door of their courtyard and eats and drinks with their children alone, but does not feed the poor and the embittered soul, this is not the joy of the mitzvah, but the joy of the belly. What a wonderful way to acknowledge the challenging years of wandering the desert by creating the same physical space of the sukkah, but giving it new, meaningful, and joyful purpose. And we open ourselves and we open our homes to others around us, not just our families, but the stranger and the orphan. And our tradition understands that we are not isolated in this world, that we must give of ourselves and share our rich tradition with those around us. As I was preparing my Devar Torah last night, I began writing this idea about bringing in the guest. We call this ushpizin. Ushpizin is the practice of hachnasat orchim, the hospitality of guests. And we recall the first mention of welcoming the guests comes from our patriarch, Abraham, who in Genesis 18 welcomes the three individuals who will tell him that Sarah and he will become parents quite late in life. And Abraham and Sarah laugh, which is why they named their son Yitzchak, meaning to laugh. And as I was in the middle of writing about ushpizin, when my esteemed colleague, Cantor Siebel, called me, and she asked me what my Devar Torah is going to be about, and actually she invited me to speak on quite a different topic. She actually brought something to my attention that's been on all our hearts in the last week or so, but asked me to really bring to light an incident that took place with our students in Beechwood, as I'm sure many of you saw. And for those of you who haven't yet heard, there was a football play with an anti-Semitic name that became the cause for concern at the Beechwood versus Brooklyn High School football game last Friday night, just as all of us were preparing for Yom Kippur. The coach for Brooklyn High School repeatedly yelled, "Nazi, Nazi, Nazi," which was the name he chose to give one of the football plays. And thankfully, it was decided that the coach would stop using this offensive name if the players at Beechwood would play the second half of the game. And later, we also learned that several Brooklyn players used racial slurs multiple times during that game. We know that Beechwood Public School have many Jewish students, and sadly, this is not the first, second, or even the third anti-Semitic trope our students have suffered through. In the last year, during other sporting events, students were yelling racial slurs One of those events with Lake Catholic School even had students showing up to the field with swastikas on their calves. And it's not that the incident with Brooklyn High School didn't seem significant to talk about. After all, it did make national news. I was hoping to discuss the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah, but the reality is, dwelling in the sukkah is equally important for Jews as it is for people of different faiths. So I appreciate your phone call, Cantor Sibo, which reframed my words for this evening. On this festive holiday of Sukkot, I want us to think about Ushpizin by contemplating who we invite into our sukkah. We're commanded to rejoice with the stranger. This gives us a unique and valuable opportunity to welcome those who are different from us. Perhaps those who have never met Jews before, not only to rejoice alongside us, but to learn and partake in our ceremonies. The recognition that Jews are a minority living amongst a majority has been true throughout the generations, and our sages recognize that if we don't bring in the other, we risk being continuously misunderstood and, even worse, sometimes falling victim to hatred. Had anyone on the Brooklyn High School team ever sat in a sukkah or experienced a Passover Seder or learned about the horrific acts of the Holocaust, they would have immediately flagged the name of the play as being something hurtful and harmful. It's not rocket science. Worse, it's ignorance. Our Talmud states that it is fitting that all Jews should sit in one sukkah. And if this is logistically difficult to arrange, it should, at the very least, be implemented in principle. From that, we are meant to understand that we should cram as many guests as possible into our sukkah, demonstrating that we fully intend to partake in this tradition, each in our own domain. In our Friday night liturgy, which we just chanted a few moments ago, we sang the Hashkivenu, which ends with Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha, where we ask God to spread over us a sukkah of shalom. Shalom meaning peace, also deriving from the word wholeness or being whole. On this Sukkot, let us pursue physical and metaphorical shalom, peace, as we continue our work to engage the other or the stranger, so our future generations do not have to contend with pain associated with ignorance. I wish us all a joyful and peaceful Sukkot. Chag Sameach.